Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Financing Philadelphia's Future with Councilmember Derek Green. I am Vanessa Lowe. I'm your host. I am the host of Vanessa's Money Hour on G-Town Radio. I'm also Power Philadelphia's co-chair of the Economic Dignity team. And we are here, as we have been for many, many months now, to talk about Philadelphia's public banking initiative. You can join the public banking discussion about our prospective Philadelphia Public Bank on Zoom every month on that last Tuesday. It's a short half hour that we have. So today I know we're going to meet a couple of the potential board members, but let me go ahead and pass it on to Councilmember Green for a welcome and intro.
Well, Vanessa, thank you for opportunity to be with all of you once again. I appreciate this ongoing dialogue that we've had over a number of months, over a couple of years to be exact, really having the ability to really discuss what is this idea of public banking. And as we have passed the legislation creating the Philadelphia Public Finance Authority, which is our first step towards bringing public banking to Philadelphia. As you all know, through the work of your coalition, this legislation was passed near unanimously in City Council, and we tried to get funding for this initiative in our last budget process, as well as get the administration to appoint board members to this new entity. Unfortunately, that has not occurred, but we are going to continue to push forward with advocacy on this issue, especially as we try to address the issues in our city of Philadelphia as it pertains to small businesses and provide new opportunities for those businesses to grow, as well as help to grow new industries like solar and other green collar industries, and help cooperatives in neighborhoods like Mount Airy and all around the city of Philadelphia. So we're going to continue to push forward on this issue. And I want to thank the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition for the work that they have done. I know they've reached out to the mayor to participate in today's conversation. I've written letters to the mayor about my goal to see this step towards public banking be accomplished. And the mayor has responded that he thought existing entities could meet that bill. But if those existing agencies had the wherewithal and could do those things, they will be doing some of the things that we played out in our legislation. So looking forward to having this conversation as we do every month, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Council Member. So we have at least 3 of the 9 names that were forwarded to the mayor for potential board members. So let's start with getting some introductions from each of those. Why don't we start with Peter Winslow, who's been on all of these. Peter.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'm very pleased to have been recommended by the City Council as a candidate to be a member of the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority Board. We on candidates, as well as the members of the coalition, the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition, have tried to engage with Mayor Kenney in a conversation about the financial authority and the public bank without much success so far. From the letter that he wrote to Councilman Green on June 22nd, there seems to be a misunderstanding about what it is that the financial authority does and what its purpose is. And we'd like to clarify those misunderstandings with the mayor, because we think that if we have a good conversation with him, that we'll actually be able to get past his current hesitations and concerns and can move forward more aggressively and more quickly to help provide the benefits to the people of Philadelphia that are envisioned by the financial authority. In terms of my background, most of the work that I've been involved in beyond the work with the Banking Coalition has had to do with environmental justice issues. And I'll leave it there in the interest of time, Vanessa.
Thank you. And we have Deb Feigart, who's also been on most of these, if not all.
Hello, colleagues and friends. It's nice to see you. I'm also honored to have my name forwarded by council to be on the board of the authority. I am an economist by training, and I've spent a career in public sector higher education in economics and financial literacy. I have spent decades working on issues of economic development, economic inequality, which I'm very concerned about, and discrimination in all of its stripes. And one of the arguments that Mayor Kenny, the empty chair here, because he did not come to this meeting to which he was invited, has said is that there are no funding gaps in the city, and the city has institutions that can take care of all of the needs that Councilmember Green mentioned in his opening. Well, I can say that we have a higher education affordability crisis, and people cannot just get access to funds to further their skills and their training. And a single debt relief for a certain population is not going to be anything but a Band-Aid on a deep-rooted problem. So I'm very concerned about improving access and affordability to all kinds of advanced education and training, vocational training, technical education, working with partners and unions in the city and institutes for more apprenticeship training. So I'll leave it there, but there are so many things that this authority could do, and there are so many gaps, and the current institutions are not doing it, although we would be happy to partner with them in future. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Deb. And we have David Backer. David, tell us about yourself.
Hi there, everyone. Also, I'm extremely honored to be on the list of people going to be there on the board of advisors for the authority. I am a professor of education policy at Westchester University, and my research over the last few years has specialized in education finance, specifically focusing on school facilities finance and how buildings and their maintenance and their generally infrastructure gets provided for in terms of resources and money. And a lot of my concern when I'm teaching classes on the subject, when I'm researching, are the politics involved in these financial systems, specifically the kinds of financial systems that leave public entities like municipal governments, school districts, heavily indebted to when they're trying to provide basic stuff for the people of Philadelphia. And so I think one of my chief concerns here is who's in the driver's seat when it comes to financing public infrastructure. Is it the people or is it not? And I think that the financial authority and the public bank that's under creation here is a really great intervention in this, particularly as a climate crisis engulfs us in terms of the rising waters, heat levels, droughts. We're going to need to be able to mitigate and adapt to these changes, particularly in our buildings. And I think that it's public finance that's really going to be leading the effort in being able to meet that challenge. So thank you very much again for inviting me to be here.
Thank you, David. I'm glad you're with us.
Vanessa, if I could just jump in real quick.
Please do.
Just listen to the bios, the brief, very brief bios that these three individuals have provided, give you a real perspective on their depth of knowledge in reference to finance from three very diverse perspectives. So the fact that we were able to bring experts into this process who really have an understanding of finance, but from three different distinct perspectives, gives you a flavor of the type of people that, you know, if they had the opportunity to be appointed, we're part of the leadership for the Philadelphia Public Finance Authority. And if I could just touch on one aspect that Professor Feigart talked about, is that in the mayor's letter he stated over and over again that we already have existing entities that can do this work. However, as my own personal experience as a former lender, we should not have entities that are lending dollars out, also providing the letters of credit or the credit enhancements to those same businesses. That creates even more risk to those entities. It's just like in the insurance industry, people get insurance and then those same individuals or businesses get reinsurance. While the entity that provides insurance doesn't also reinsure that same company. So that's part of the reason why having what we're trying to create through the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority to provide credit enhancements to Black and brown businesses, to hard to lend to entities like credit unions, and to newer industries, especially in the green collar industry, trying to address the issue are things that are very important going forward for our city.
Thank you. If there are other members or participants here who have been put forward for the board, please speak up. I may not be seeing all the names, but I have a question in the interim. So Councilmember Green, I read the letter and I was disappointed that the mayor actually didn't address one of the big issues that we are on this journey for, which is to really get our money out of Wall Street. And we need the financing authority to be active and whole in order to move through the process of eventually having a public bank. Can you speak to that?
Well, one of the other reasons why the administration said they did not support this new entity is because its powers were very broad. But if you look at a lot of the entities that have been created by the city, they also have very broad powers. But just because we created the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority with broad powers doesn't mean that we're going to use all of those powers going forward. Just like a lot of other entities that have been created by the city from PIDC and others don't use all of the powers that are enumerated to them. It gives them the broad latitude, if need be in the future, to be creative. They have that ability without having to recreate entities through legislation. So I just felt that was somewhat of a red herring to make that argument. But ultimately, we need to look at how we do things as a city and be creative. Vanessa, you talked about financing and Wall Street, and that's how we traditionally have done things as a city. But if we're going to really address some of the challenges we have in our city, we have to be willing to think outside the box and look at new ideas and new concepts. And this is not just happening here in Philadelphia. I've had conversations with local elected officials, federal elected officials, state elected officials all over this country who are looking at different ideas like public banking and are looking at how they can do things differently to address some of the issues that are impacting their residents.
Thank you. We're going to go back a little bit to our old format. Peter, let me know if you have questions, and I want to let everybody know because we do have some new names in the panel here. Please put your questions in the chat and Peter will uplift those. Particularly want to reach out to David, as I don't think you've participated as much in these. Do you have any particular questions about serving as a board member if you do get placed?
Questions by way of the sort of role or the responsibility, or
Any questions at all?
well, I mean, I certainly have a question as to the timeline with respect to when I would be able to so serve. I think at this point, as we can see from the empty chair, there's sort of an empty space, kind of vacuum that really needs to be filled, not just in that mayor's chair, but we've got a whole board seat, a board table of chairs that need filling. So my question, to the mayor is, why not move forward with this?
And if I could follow up on David's point, not only why not move forward with this, if these issues and concerns that the mayor articulated in his letter were so troubling then why not at the public hearing where we had this legislation up for a vote in council, why not have your members of your cabinet who testified at that hearing, who said they had some concerns, but never raised the issue of concern to the point of we're going to veto or not support this legislation, but really decided to wait until after it became law to then say, well, we're not going to take certain steps. Or when we had initial hearings on this whole idea before we even introduced legislation. And we've had multiple steps in the process where the administration could have really articulated their concern and stated and been more transparent in saying that we just do not support this initiative. And then the other point is that we spent months working with parts of the administration, both the city treasurer's office, the finance department, and the city solicitor's office, helping us to draft and craft the legislation the way it's presented to make it the most workable type of legislation within the guidelines and the ordinances, both of the city of Philadelphia, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and also federal regulations. So during that time period, if there was a real concern that this legislation should not move forward, it should have been communicated to your department members that were providing us various types of guidance, or even at the hearing level, so that we could have had a more robust conversation to explore those issues and had some real transparency to the citizens of the city of Philadelphia to explain why those issues we thought were not major issues, and at least come to some type of compromise on the understanding and find a path forward to do the timeline that David talked about.
So Councilmember Green, in last month's press release, I think, we talked a little bit about sort of, well, what are the options if the mayor really doesn't respond and refuses to name the board? And last month, I think even the idea of, a lawsuit might be put forward. What is the current thinking, I guess, of you and the coalition as to how to keep this moving forward and how to respond to inaction by the mayor?
So the idea of litigation has been explored. I've had some initial conversations in that space. Ultimately, as a member of city government, I think that may be action that if the coalition took upon themselves regarding the legislation, they could think through that perspective and those steps. But the unfortunate thing is that we have a mayor that did not respond to the request from the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition, finally did respond to my letter in reference to both board appointments and funding for this new entity. And even with litigation, it takes time for litigation to play itself out. So, we have some opportunities on the horizon where there'll be leadership changes. And I would hope that the coalition will work with whoever comes into that leadership role for the city will be supportive of legislation that's been passed by the members of City Council, the duly elected legislative branch of the city of Philadelphia, to put that legislation in action as requested by the members of City Council and who are supported by the citizens of the city of Philadelphia.
Thank you. Peter, I see a question.
Yeah, so we have a question from Oscar Perry-Abuelo. And he's asking, is there a precedent for this behavior by a mayoral administration, perhaps under previous mayors? And if so, any lessons to take from those experiences?
The only other previous situation that I can reflect on that's somewhat similar was legislation that was opposed by late council member David Cohen, and in his, I'll just say, negotiation with the street administration, where litigation was filed, but it was resolved before we actually got to a trial. And a lot of litigation as an attorney, I know this from my own personal experience, often does get resolved before you get to trial. However, because you come to an impasse, that's why things get to litigation and to a trial. Hopefully there'll be some opportunities going forward, but I think really one of the things that needs to occur, and I know this group through the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition has been keeping up the advocacy. But I think we need to continue that as we move into the fall and as we go into next spring.
That's a good transition. So Peter or other members of the coalition, do you want to share what kind of activities you're working on to keep the momentum and keep the energy up?
Well, Vanessa, we're moving forward, and we note that in the letter that Mayor Kenny sent to Councilmember Green, he talked about his intent. So his intent could change. We think that he's been uninformed or misinformed, or somehow some of the positions that he has taken just are clearly not accurate. So we really think that if we could engage him in a conversation, that we could correct those misunderstandings, and that as a result of that, his intention would change. Councilmember Green has said as much to the mayor that upon further, reflection and actually looking at the issues, that he would reconsider. So we think that's, definitely a possibility, and that certainly would be preferable to, to the alternatives, because we're looking for a collaborative approach where we work together with the administration and with all the participants in the financial ecosystem in Philadelphia. Our intention is not to be particularly contentious. On the other hand, as has been pointed out, the mayor appears to be a scofflaw. I mean, his oath of office and his responsibilities of mayor are specifically to execute and enforce the ordinance of the city. And this is an ordinance of the city. It's a law that's on the books. He did not veto this law. He did not engage in a robust public debate about this. He still will not engage in a discussion. He's not here today. He hasn't responded to an open letter from the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition. He hasn't responded to private communications, 5 emails sent by the candidates for appointment to the board. And we really don't understand why that's the case. Maybe it's something to do with summertime. And as we get to the other side of Labor Day, the mayor will start to actually pay attention to this issue. And we can have the kind of conversation that we think the people of Philadelphia deserve. We deserve to have a mayor who will talk to the people about the issues that are brought to him, talk about why he would refuse to implement legislation passed by city council in violation of his oath of office.
And if I could just follow up on Peter's comments, we as citizens at the city of Philadelphia, we expect more and deserve better from our government. And even though we can agree to disagree, I have a lot of meetings with a lot of different people, a lot of different perspectives. Some I disagree with their positions, but we still, as servant leaders, need to provide an opportunity for that type of dialogue. And especially when citizens are making that request of you, and you should at least reciprocate in some form or fashion.
And in terms of moving forward, Councilmember Green, we've talked about the transfer ordinance that takes place in the fall session of council, and that you are or already have renewed your request for funding for the startup of the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority. Can you speak to that?
Well, every year we have a transfer ordinance which occurs during the mid portion of the budget. As some of the participants of this call know, that the city's fiscal year goes from July 1 to June. And often after we have the start of a new fiscal year, we find that the revenue from the previous fiscal year may have been better or worse than what was provided to city council as we're trying to put together the budget. This year, after the end of the fiscal year, we learned that the city had another $100 million on top of the surplus they had going into the end of the fiscal year, when we looked at the actual dollars that came into the city of Philadelphia. Now, that was not surprising to me, because as a past president of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, I knew from our monthly meetings with the governor's office that the Commonwealth was doing pretty well revenue-wise. In fact, the month of April, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania brought in the most amount of revenue ever in 1 month. And considering that the city of Philadelphia is city of the first class and the largest city in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I had some perspective that Philadelphia was in that same position. So as we're now going into session, will be starting September 15th. There'll be an appropriation committee hearing probably sometime in late September or early October, mid-October. That could be an opportunity to advocate for additional funding for the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority through that transfer ordinance. And I know that the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition has been starting to reach out to members of the Appropriations Committee to make that push. I know I've also articulated those same ideas, although I'm not a member of the Appropriations Committee.
Thank you for that. We are going to continue to have Financing Philly's Future with Councilmember Green. This is a program sponsored by the coalition. Peter, can you speak to maybe how we're going to move forward and what sort of guests we might have in the future?
As we go forward, Vanessa, we want to introduce the candidates that the City Council has put forward to the mayor for appointment to the board of directors for the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority, and to let the public get to meet them, share ideas about the way in which the financial authority should be structured, and the programs, specifically the programs that the financial authority should pursue. We're going to be engaging not only in discussion amongst ourselves as candidates for the board of directors, but also with citizens, citizen groups, stakeholder groups, trying to solicit the best ideas that we can get from the best minds in Philadelphia, and also to hear from people who are hurting, because the real purpose that we have for setting up this financial authority is because there's a lot of pain out there that we disagree with the mayor. The existing entities do not really have the capacity and the will or the wherewithal, let's put it that way, to address some of these issues. So we want to identify where the gaps are. We want to understand why the gaps are there. We have a lot of brain power and the people who are not only members of the candidate group, but also members of the coalition and people from stakeholder groups around the city. We want to energize all that intellectual energy and have a really robust discussion that takes place going forward.
And Vanessa, if I could just add one point, I think that's really great ideas of how we continue the momentum and maintain the momentum of this dialogue and conversation, at least during the time period of this administration. And I hope that this dialogue will continue both with other potential board members that have been referred to the mayor, as well as the people that can be helped by this legislation. And I think that's something that's important going forward, regardless if I am in the current capacity as a member of City Council or not.
Great. We've got 1 minute left, so enough time to say goodbye and say we'll be back next month, last Tuesday, 4:30. Councilmember Green, any last words?
I just really want to thank all of the people that put their name up to be a part of the board of Philadelphia Public Financial Authority. Thank you for stepping up and volunteering your service to try to help move this initiative forward, to provide some opportunities for people that are really hurting in the city of Philadelphia and helping to do things differently in our city. And also just thank all of the members of the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition for your support, your energy, and advocacy regarding this issue.
Great. We met 3 of the 9 names that have been put forward today. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to meet more next time. See you next month.
Thank you.